From me, a special thank you to Hazem and Josh for being here. If you do have any questions, can you please post them in the Q&A box? You can ask questions without addressing any of the two speakers, or you can address the questions directly to them. And just again, a very big thank you from ELT Professionals for Palestine and all of us for Hazem and Josh for being here. Hazem, I know you first, so I'm going to hand over to you first.
Okay, thank you everybody for joining this webinar. Actually, I want to talk about my life, my personal experience, but I will not talk about as a human. I want to talk about my life as a Palestinian. What does it mean to live under the Israeli occupation? I am as a regular and ordinary citizen, Palestinian citizens in the Palestinian territory. What are the phases that I have gone through under the Israeli occupation since I was born until now? But I cannot talk about it before I give general overview about the history of Palestine and the Israeli occupation. Okay, about the Israeli occupation of our land. As you know that the Jewish existence in Palestine has a long history. We don't have any problem with the Jewish attendance or presence in Palestine. But the problem started when the Zionist thought and then the Zionist movement appeared in the world in general, and they started to work in Palestine 120 years ago. They started to push the Jews around the world to immigrate to Palestine, claiming that this is their historical right to take control or to control or to take over this land, regardless of the existence of other people in this land. And with the time, they started to increase their immigration to Palestine. And as you know, the history of the waves of immigration since the late of 19th century until the beginning of the 20th century. At that time, Palestinians were the majority in Palestine, and Jews stayed the minority. And it stayed until 1948, when they declared the establishment of the state of Israel, or the independence, as they claim. Independence from what? I don't know. Independence usually comes from colonial power. But the British colonial power at the time was complicit with the Zionist movement. So in 1948, Israel established and they declared its independence, displacing more than 750,000 Palestinians in many areas, in Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, and many places in the world, and for sure in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, as the West Bank stayed under the control of the Jordanian authorities, and the Gaza Strip stayed under the Egyptian authority. So this area remained under the Arab control. Actually, Israel wanted the Palestinians who went to Gaza Strip to move to Egypt, but Egypt didn't allow them. There were about 200,000 Palestinians at that time, and it was a big number. If you know that the population of the Gaza Strip at that time was very small number. It's about 20,000 or so. So that number was very big. So you know that the majority of the population or the people in the Gaza Strip are refugees. Because of that, Egypt didn't allow the Palestinians to go to Egypt, and it kept them in that area, in that short, or not short, it's a very narrow strip on the coastal area. And Israel named that place Gaza Strip. Actually, the Israeli officials at the time were aware, were aware about the problem that could cause by those Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, as the majority of the people there are refugees. So some of them suggested to allow them to return to their homes and lands in occupied Palestine. But then this suggestion failed because it faced rejection from the majority of the Israeli politicians after 1948. Anyhow, the Palestinian movement, the Palestinian national movement, started in the Palestinian territory in 1965. Started in Jerusalem. They established Fatah and other Palestinian factions, and also established the PLO to be like umbrella for all the Palestinian factions who aim to liberate Palestine from the Israeli occupation and to fall down the resist project of Israel, which established a state exclusively for Jews, regardless of the existence of the other people. So, as you know, that in 1967, Israel occupied the rest of Palestine, beside the Sinai Peninsula and Golan Heights and other lands. Some says even lands from Saudi Arabia, like island of Tiran and Sanafir Islands. Anyhow, it is not the problem, but you know that the rest of Palestine now under the Israeli occupation, including the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. So the Palestinian movement, the Palestinian Liberation Movement, moved to Jordan from 1967 to 1970. And after September 1970, it moved to Lebanon, and it stayed there until 1982. And after 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon, and it expelled the Palestinian Liberation PLO from Lebanon to other countries, and they are not neighboring countries like Jordan and Lebanon. They expelled them to Tunisia, Algeria, South Yemen, and other countries. At that time, we didn't see much resistance by the Palestinians to the Israeli occupation. So the Palestinians thought about another solution, how to resist Israel. And it was through resisting Israel from inside Palestine, not as used to be like before, to resist Israel from outside in Jordan and Lebanon and other countries. And even in Europe, as you know, that the Palestinian carried out some military operation against Israeli targets in Europe, like Munich attack in 1970s, and the Entebbe attack on the airplane in 1980s and 70s, and other attacks. So the plan was to initiate resistance inside Palestine, not from outside Palestine anymore. And actually, it started in 1987, and they call it uprising in the Palestinian, in the Arabic word was intifada. I think the English dictionary accepted that word intifada as the meaning of uprising. So the Palestinians started their intifada in 1987, and it was after an incident happened in Jabalia camp, after the Israeli tank, or not tank, after Israeli military vehicle crashed some Palestinian workers after they finishing their work inside the occupied territories. At that time, I was born. I was born in Gaza Strip. I was born in Gaza City, in Catholic or not Catholic. It was Christian hospital in Gaza City. But my family uh, are from my family members are from Khan Yunis city in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. So, but because the quality of services provided by that hospital, my family preferred to make the delivery in that hospital in Gaza City. So I was born in that time before the second Intifada, just 2 years in 1987. And in 1987, the first Intifada started, and it had many manifestations. So I will talk about, I will divide my presentation into the periods that I went through from the first Intifada and during the peace process after the first Intifada until the second Intifada, and then from 2000 and 2005 until the Israeli disengagement from the Gaza Strip and until now. So, if we want to talk about the first Intifada, it had many manifestations. It was characterized by resisting the Israeli occupation by all means available for Palestinians, including stones, very small pieces to throw on the Israeli soldiers in the streets. The Israeli authorities started to establish settlements inside the Palestinian lands in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. So we used to see Israeli settlers in the streets of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank for sure. But I never been to the West Bank. But the situation there was similar to the situation in the Gaza Strip. So from 1987 to 1993, during the first Intifada, the Palestinians resisted the Israeli occupation by all means, including disobedience. The Palestinians used this method to resist the Israeli occupation through stop paying the tax to the Israeli authorities because they don't see any services for the tax they paid for the Israeli authorities. And Israel used some task to support the Israeli settlements in Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And I remember at that time, Israel used all means to oppress and suppress the first Intifada, like killing people in the street, shooting them for nothing, or for just justification, for any silly justification, like throwing stones on the Israeli tanks. So you could see many Palestinians killed by the Israeli army because they were accused of throwing the Israeli tanks by stones. So you can imagine the reason. But with the time, the Palestinians started to use more violent means, like attacking the Israeli troops by kitchen knives, or even some guns. Some guns smuggled from Israel. I remember the guns that the Palestinian resistance used. It was Uzi. Uzi is the famous gun machine invented by Israel at that time, and it was common to the Israeli settlers to carry that gun to attack the Palestinians when they tried to confiscate their lands. So the Palestinian managed to get that gun machine to attack the Israeli troops in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And Israel, on the other hand, used all the means, as I said, to suppress the Palestinian Intifada, and they use the curfew for a long time. The people were not allowed to go outside uh, for under the security reason by the Israeli authorities. And actually, sometimes because I was a child at the time, and my brothers and friends, sometimes we felt happy because it it made us stay home, and we didn't need to go to school. So it's good news for students not to go to school. But how? For using curfew. Curfew, so you will not go to school and you will not go outside too. You cannot play outside. You will stay at home. And I remember my late mother, actually mentioned this story several times. She gave birth my younger brother during a curfew in the Gaza Strip. So it was very difficult for her, and she always talked about the experience uh, she faced during the delivery of my brother, because she went to the hospital on foot with my father. The hospital was about 4 or 5 kilometers from our home, and our neighbor helped us to take them just to another neighborhood, and then he asked them to go through narrower roads to get the hospitals. And then when she arrived at the hospital, she was almost collapsed and almost died. Because of that, she bleeded a lot of blood, and her condition was crucial. But the doctors there helped her. So this one of the experiences I always heard from my mother about life when the curfew imposed by Israel. And I remember also the Israeli authority chasing the Palestinian for no reason. Like if you have a tape cassette for songs, they could check it if it contains patriotic songs for Palestine or for glorify the Palestinian resistance. If you have that cassette, they could put you in jail, or uh, you face some legal problem if you have this one. So it was illegal to have any cassette contains patriotic songs that talks about Palestine. And at the time, I remember some songs like Marcel Khalifa songs about بالأحمر كفناه. It's famous. It was famous song by Marcel Khalifa, and it was commonly used by Palestinians during the occasion of some national occasions. And the Palestinian, as you know, that the main weapon that the Palestinian used at the time was stone, and then they started to use knives and pistols. Uh, and here another way of the Israeli suppression of the Palestinian Intifada is to close the road. Road closure was famous by Israel. You are at home, and suddenly when you go out, you will find the main road that you take you out is closed by concrete. There are barrels, as you see in the picture here, barrels and filled with cement. So the road, and it has two layers, as you see, because if the Palestinian manage to pass through the first layer, they will face the second layer here. So it was difficult, very difficult. Even bulldozer were not easy for them to destroy these walls by the Israeli authorities, and also prevented many Palestinians from their home, for their work, for their schools and universities at that time. And even for market, if people wanted to go to for shopping, they don't have way to go to market. So because of that, the Palestinian created a small market in their area to sell the basic necessities for the Palestinians in that area, like vegetables and food and other products. And I talked a lot about the first Intifada. I want to skip it to go to the after in the first Intifada, when it ended by signing the Oslo Accords between the PLO, led by Yasser Arafat, and Israel, led by Isaac Rabin. At that time, actually, all the Palestinians were optimistic about the future. Actually, even me, I was a child at the time, about 9 years old, but I was aware of the situation there, and I understand all the points. I saw the killings in the street. I suffered from the Israeli occupation. I suffered from the tear gas by Israel. I suffer when I saw some people I knew lost their lives. So I understand the difficult situation. Maybe children now uh, don't really understand the political situation they are in. But at that time, we were fully aware about our situation. So we were optimistic about the future. Yes, why not? We could we could make it. We could make peace with Israel. And we saw the results of that peace process when the Palestinian Authority was established and the Palestinian forces entered the Gaza Strip with under Yasser Arafat, and they held the first elections in 1996, election the presidential election and also the legislative elections in 1996, yes, in January 1996. So we were actually, the vibes at the time was good, even though Hamas rejected that accord and tried to abort it, because it didn't like the terms and the conditions of this process. And we saw also the Palestinian Authority suppression against Hamas. We heard that about the Palestinian Authority trying to chasing the Hamas member and put them in jail to prevent them from ruin the peace process. And it succeeded. The Palestinian Authority succeeded to almost finish Hamas at that time. Actually, no one get the level of suppression Hamas as the Palestinian Authority did in 1990s after the Oslo Agreement. One of the symbol of the Palestinian sovereignty or the Palestinian achievement at that time was establishing Gaza International Airport. It was in Rafah city. It was very important for us because from the first time you will travel directly to other countries. You don't need to register. You don't need to wait for the longer process. You don't need to travel for long distance to get the airport. Just a few minutes, and you will find yourself in the airport and travel to other countries. So it was a very symbolic achievement for us to have, even though it was under the Israeli control or under the Israeli supervision. So the Israeli supervised the airport at that time. But it was okay for us because it was the first step toward getting the full independence from Israel. And as I told you, we were optimistic until 2000, after the collapse of the peace process in Camp David II in the US. And the Palestinian Authority declared that Israel rejected to grant us our independence and they want to control our land or something like that. So we have some details about the reason. And for sure, the US placed blame on the Palestinians for the collapse of the peace process in Camp David too. Now we are in 2000, and after the collapse of peace process, and the Palestinian uh, couldn't achieve their independence from Israel, they commenced the second Intifada, or the second Palestinian uprising in 2000, in September 2000. And the reason was famous after the Ariel Sharon, the opposition leader, breaking into Al-Aqsa Mosque in Al-Quds in Jerusalem. And then we saw the breaking down the second Intifada. And the Palestinians used the same methods, the same means against Israel, which is using stones to resist the Israeli occupation. But this time, because we had the Palestinian security services, some of them participated in the Intifada, and they used their gun machine to resist the Israeli occupation, and they succeeded. So they succeeded to harm the Israeli forces. Because of that, Israel used higher level of violence against Palestinians. And from the first time in our life, I see tanks like Merkava 3, and also helicopter, and F-16 and F-15. All of these, this is the first time. I never seen these military technology before this time. I always see just military vehicle, okay, not tank, before in the first Intifada. But in the second Intifada, now we have higher or a new level of violence by Israel to suppress the Palestinian, to finish the Intifada. During the second Intifada, as I told you, it was very violent by Israel. This started with our symbol, which was the airport. They destroyed the airport. They first bombarded it by airstrike, and then they bulldoze it in 2000, just a few weeks after the beginning of the second Intifada. And the strategies Israel used were totally different to suppress the Palestinian Intifada. And among the strategies and operation that Israel used to suppress the Palestinians were a strategy called shaving. That means to shave, to make the Palestinian land like head, and to shave it from any hair. And the hair means here, the hair means the houses, trees, and anything on the ground. So it should be shaved by the Israeli bulldozer. And there is famous incident when some activists, some peace activists from the Western countries like the US, and here we have the photo of the American activist Shulkuri. She tried to stop the Israeli bulldozer from bulldozing the Palestinian homes, and unfortunately she was killed by the Israeli bulldozer. And as you know that the US, I think Josh will talk about the American complicity. They played themselves dead. They said nothing about that incident, as they did when the American activist 2 weeks ago in the West Bank, and also Shirin al-Baaqli when she was killed in the West Bank in 2022. And she is American, as you know that, by Israeli army. They killed by the Israeli army, and also the US did and say nothing to force Israel to stop its behavior against not Palestinians, at least against the foreign activists, peace activists. And here is my photo in our land. Actually, I want to tell you that our financial situation was good. My family, my father was, I can say, rich. He was rich because we had some farms, and the income from these farms was really good. And the main farm we had, this one, and we had poultry, chicken, and some animals, and here some vegetables like sweet potato and potato and other vegetables. So at that time, when the Israel started its strategy to achieve, or sorry, not achieve, for shaving the Palestinian land, they started with the land that near the settlements, and our land was near the settlement, the Morag settlement. It was famous for its name, Morag. And in one day, the farmer or the farm operator called my father saying that now the bulldozer Israeli bulldozers are destroying our land and our farm. And actually, it was a turning point in our life because we we fall from, I can say, high level in lifestyle to being poor actually. Sometimes we couldn't even secure our meals a few years later after destroying it. Actually, they destroyed it in 2001, and my father spent his savings, and after spending his savings, some days we couldn't secure our meals of the day. And then we struggled until we come back to the middle class in 2007 and 2008 at that time. But before that, was our financial situation was really dire. So, and the main reason is the Israeli policy against Palestinians to punish them for resisting the Israeli occupation. And in 2005, Israel declared its disengagement from the Gaza Strip. And ironically, Ariel Sharon mentioned that Netzarim settlements in the middle of the Gaza Strip is like Tel Aviv in terms of fortification and in terms of importance. But Ariel Sharon himself, after 1 year, declared disengagement from the Gaza Strip and dismantled all the settlements in the Gaza Strip, including Netzarim, that he mentioned before, as it is like Tel Aviv. Anyhow, this engagement was a great step for Palestinians. It approved uh, the importance of resisting the Israeli occupation by violence, actually, because without violence, the Israel wouldn't withdraw from the Gaza Strip. So the military pressure on Israel in the Gaza Strip was higher than the military pressure on the Israel in the West Bank. So Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip without withdrawing from the West Bank. So in 2005, Israel disengaged from the Gaza Strip and dismantled its settlements, but it imposed siege on the Gaza Strip. Actually, it started in 2005, even before 2005, but in 2007, after Hamas controlled the Gaza Strip, Israel officially declared the siege on the Gaza Strip because Hamas controlled the Gaza Strip, and it considered the Gaza Strip as hostile entity, and everything in or out from the Gaza Strip should be under the Israeli control, and they will not allow many things, even the basic stuff were not allowed to enter the Gaza Strip because they suspect Hamas would use it for military efforts against Israel. So the situation in the Gaza Strip at that time was difficult, and that will make it worse than that the Israel attacks from time to time. The siege was not enough for Israel. They had frequent attacks on the Gaza Strip. The first one was in 2008 and 2009, and the second one 2012, 2014, and 2018 and 2021 until the last year. So Israel called it mowing the grass, to cut or to finish any military capability of Hamas in the Gaza Strip and to stop its growing. So they call it mowing the grass. While sieging it, so attacking the Hamas capability. Actually, they didn't only attack Hamas, they attack entire Palestinians. Intentionally, they attack even Palestinians who are not related to Hamas, who don't belong to Hamas. And they know that those people don't belong to Hamas, but as long as they want to attack those people who support Hamas or who like Hamas, because Hamas gets its strength from those people. So let's attack them and make them suffer to stop them from supporting Hamas or believing in Hamas approach of resistance against Israel occupation. So we have this series of attacks by Israel on the Gaza Strip during the siege during the last 15 years, and the Palestinians try to get themselves out of this circle of violence, siege and attacks or mowing the grass. So they initiated the Great March of Return in 2018 and 2019. Actually, from its name, you will understand the Palestinians try to return to their homes and lands, as most of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are refugees. But actually, the actual reason or the actual goal was to stop the Israeli siege and the blockade on the Gaza Strip. This is the actual goal of the Palestinian and Hamas, because Hamas supported that march. But Israel killed more than 241 and injured more than 10,000 Palestinians. And Israel didn't lose any soldier or no one injured during the march. The Palestinians didn't attack, so it was totally peaceful march. But Israel responded very violently on that march. I think that from that time, the Palestinians started to find another way to get rid of the miserable situation that we are in now. Now the West Bank is under the Israeli control, and they're about to annex it. And Israel will get recognition from the Arab countries and normalization the relation with Arab countries for no price, almost for nothing. So the Palestinian, they have to face their own fate without any helping or from anyone. And being a Palestinian in the Gaza Strip means to know many people who lost their lives. Well, before this genocide, actually, this genocide is exceptional. We can say that because the scale of casualties or the killing in this genocide is unprecedented in the Israeli occupation history of Palestine. So I knew many people who lost their lives. I just want to mention one category of the people who lost their lives. Those people, my colleagues at school, when I was in high school, when I was in 10, 11, and 12th grade. I shared my desk with those people. This guy, I shared my desk when I was in 10th grade. And this one, I shared my desk, my table at school when I was in 11th grade, and this one when I was in 12th grade. All of them were killed by Israel. All of them. So I am talking about only this category, the people I shared the table with them when I was in high school. I don't want to talk about other people. I don't want to talk about the other classmates. I don't want to talk about my neighbors. I don't want to talk about my friends or the people who belong to my extended family. So the number will be much higher than those people. So just this a sample of the people I know from the category I know. So knowing these people, actually to know these people and then to hear that they lost their life or they were killed by Israel, it will sharply affect your life. It will make you feel like disabled because those people you knew them and you cannot do anything for them, and you don't understand why they were killed. You don't know uh, what did they do to be killed. And I could one of those people who lost their lives. So it is very difficult to when you look at the people you knew in your life and they're killed by Israel. Actually, it is really tough, and makes me think the main problem, it is not about the location. It is about the oppression by the Israeli occupation. We need to get rid of that oppression. And and before moving to the genocide, the ongoing genocide in the Gaza Strip, many people think that the Gaza Strip was a place for people, for miserable people, or frustrated people. Actually, Gaza Strip was rich of culture and known for resilience of its people. People there like living life. They like to enjoy their lives. They like to create the happiness, small happiness, even though they were under the siege. But they try to chase the happy moment in their daily lives. So you can find some places, not only places, but also in their behavior. They like, actually, in my country, the people have a humor sense there. Even the situation was unimaginable for many people outside. But believe me that the people there, they have a humor sense, and they like to laugh and they like to enjoy their lives. So you can see that if I don't know if some people visited the Gaza Strip, you they may notice uh, the the style of the the people in Gaza, that they try to make their small happiness there, regardless of the situation that Israel imposed on us. And this is just sample of some photos that show the people, how people in Gaza love life in with- without considering the Israeli procedures. And this is the photo of our home here in the right down, and in top left we have this photo of me with my beloved late mother and with my brother, with my wife and the children during my last visit to Gaza Strip about 2.5 years ago. As I said that I enjoyed visiting Gaza Strip at that time. Uh, Everything was nice. The people was nice. Even the infrastructure, the we can say that the attractive places, the attractions there was beyond my expectation, because I visited my country after 8 years of being abroad. So it was enough time to notice the change in in the infrastructure and in the facilities in the Gaza Strip. So even my kids who are living in Taiwan now and visited some countries, they enjoy the vibes there. But all of this has gone. Our home has gone. Now it is destroyed after being bombarded by the Israeli F-16, and my mother also was killed by the Israeli army during the first bombard. And my siblings and their children, all of them were displaced from their homes and lived in tent until they managed to leave the Gaza Strip in April of this year. So I don't know what to say about it. Actually, it is very emotional when you look at the place you were grow up and you look at your mother. All of this just have become memories. I just like to scroll my phone and see these photos that reminds me of the old days. But this is the Israeli occupation. Yeah, this is our fate. We need to change it. We need to change it with any means, at any price. And we have no choice. And this is part of the buildings of my neighborhood. Actually, it is old photo. It was old in January, actually. Now the new photos arrived. Actually, is very horrible when I see our neighborhood. And I have nothing, just saying thank you.
Hazem, thank you very much for that. I just want to change the view I have. There we go. I'm going to hand over. Just actually, Hazem, thank you very much. We've got quite a few messages saying that was very, very touching. It was lovely to hear from you.
The time the time.
I did check with Josh, and he said it doesn't matter. I think it is important that people actually hear from a Palestinian person. It's I mean dual focus of what we have. Thank you very much. It was quite emotional listening to it. I'm going to move on to Josh, and again, if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A box. I can say in advance, there's quite a few people who've said thank you for sharing, Hazem, and we can look at some of the questions in a bit. Josh, again, thank you for being here, and over to you. Sorry, Hazem, can you stop your screen share so Josh can share his?
Yes, I want to do that. Here's okay.
I think if I start my screen sharing, yes, I can start sharing mine, and then it will stop his. So
okay.
Hang on, just find the tab I want to share. If you bear with me 1 second. And while I'm doing that, let me just first of all say, thank you, Gerhard, for having me, and thank you to Hazem as well for such a powerful and meaningful presentation. I think, to hear, as Gerhard said, from Palestinians is so important because your voices have been unheard for so long and continue, particularly in our Western media, to remain broadly unheard. So let me just check that you can all see my screen right now. I'm just going to switch over here to slideshow mode. Nope, can you all see that? You go to thumbs up. Okay. First of all, just wanted to say thank you to Gerhard and to ELT professionals for Palestine for hosting this event. I think it's really important for this community to talk about these issues because there are a couple of connections here, right, that I think the ELT community has through dint of the work that you all do on a regular basis. The first, and let me just see if I can set that away, hang on. The first is that, of course, you as much as you teach a language, you are also very much at the heart of cross-cultural communication and human connections. And, you know, thinking about US policy in this regard, one of the things that has struck me this past year is how so many of those who are making US policy, making decisions in Washington right now, don't have that background. When you think about people like Joe Biden, like our National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, like our Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, like the NSC Senior Director for the Middle East, Brett McGurk. These are all people who have spent the vast majority of their careers in Washington, D.C., and have not spent time in Palestine, in the Middle East, or in different cultures and communities. And I think that does make a difference. And so I think that what you are all doing is very relevant here because you have that personal experience and you also understand how important that empathy, that bridge building is. The second reason, of course, is that language matters, right? And as ELT, as English language teachers, you know what the power is of language and the choice of words. And we see that playing out here, right, in our media every day. The choice of words, are we choosing the words terrorism or resistance? Are we talking about settlements or occupation? Self-defense or genocide? And of course, one thing we also see, of course, is the choice between the active and the passive voice, right? So Israelis killed by Hamas, Palestinians die in bombardment, you know, with no one to blame apparently but the bombs themselves. So I just wanted to start off by saying that I think this is a really relevant community and a really relevant discussion, and I'm really glad to be a part of it. So I am here to talk about the US complicity in all of this, and particularly from the perspective, which is my own perspective, of political military affairs. Just very briefly, so I worked in the US State Department until last October, when I resigned because I don't believe that you know, US weapons should be used to kill thousands of civilians. I also believe that US policy is fundamentally flawed on this issue and has been for many years, and that there is a lack of debate within the US government and clearly across the US as well on this issue. So that's just my quick introduction as to why you're faced with me right now. So political military affairs, just to give a quick view before I dive into some weeds, is about the nexus of defense and diplomacy, the overlap between military tools and foreign policy tools. It's also the name of the bureau I worked in the US State Department, which is responsible for security assistance, arms transfers. I'll talk about both of those briefly in a bit more detail, as well as some other functions, security negotiations and agreements between the US and partners and allies around the world. It does actually humanitarian demining. It's the world's leading contributor to humanitarian demining, and provides foreign policy input to Defense Department plans and operations. So security assistance and arms transfers, these are terms that get thrown around a lot. From the State Department perspective, they're two quite different things and two separate things. Security assistance is money that the US gives to countries around the world to build their security capacity, whereas arms transfers are the actual mechanisms of transfers of weapons, regardless of how they're funded. Just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, particularly on the security assistance part in the Israel scope and context, the US provides on an annual basis, setting aside, you know, unusual situations and supplemental funding, about $6.1 billion around the world in grant security assistance every year through foreign military financing. That's the name of the program. Of that 6.1 billion, Israel gets 3.3 billion, right? So more than half of US military assistance around the world in a typical year is going to Israel. On top of that, so then we talk about the arms transfers piece. There are two main routes, government-to-government sales through the foreign military sales channel and direct commercial sales, which are export licenses. It's important to note that the US is by far the world's leading exporter of arms. It's 41% of the global market, about $180 billion a year, and growing. And it is run through what is generally, and we'll come back to this, a bottom-up process, meaning that in most cases, a country or a US company comes in and says, I want to buy these arms, I want to export these arms, and there is a process through which the State Department starts at the bottom with a licensing officer, and then the case moves up the chain until it is presented to senior officials for final approval. We'll come back to why that's important in a second. So there are a number of laws that govern US arms transfers. You'll see I've used blue and red here. Blue are the security assistance laws, red are the arms transfer laws. And, I recognize this isn't something, that is of, vital relevance to the ELT community, but just to point out that, for example, there are laws on the books that say, the first example here is the Leahy Law, which is perhaps the most famous of this, that the US cannot provide military assistance to any unit of the security forces of a foreign country if that unit is credibly alleged to have committed a gross violation of human rights. There are also laws, for example, 620I, a couple of bullets down, that say the US cannot provide assistance to a country that is restricting the delivery of US-funded humanitarian assistance, right? So in both of these contexts, I think it's pretty evident very quickly how we are not actually enforcing our own laws. So set aside the policies, set aside the questions of conditionality or leverage. There are basic laws here. We know that there are units of the Israeli security forces that are committing gross violations of human rights, and we've known that for a long time. We've also seen in the last year very clearly that Israel is restricting the delivery of humanitarian assistance, including US-funded humanitarian assistance into Gaza. So by both of those, there should be restrictions in law on US assistance to Israel. Those are simply not being enforced. When it comes to arms transfers, the laws, similarly apply. There's also something called the Conventional Arms Transfer Policy. This is President Biden's own policy. He issued it just in February of 2023, and it contains directive language that says no arms transfer will be authorized when it is more likely than not that the arms to be transferred will be used by the recipient to commit or aggravate the risk that the recipient will commit genocide, crimes against humanity, breaches of the Geneva Conventions, including intentionally directed attacks against civilian targets, or serious acts of violence against children. Again, here by the administration's own policy, there should not be the transfer of arms that can be involved in any of these violations of international humanitarian law. So what does the US actually provide? You heard Hazem briefly refer to this. The answer is a lot, right? And this is obviously just the top lines, but fighter jets. So all of Israel's fighter jets are of US origin, whether it's the F-15 and the F-16, as Hazem mentioned, the F-35. So, if the question is there a connection between US bombs and, the devastation of Gaza, or between US technology and arms and the devastation of Gaza, you can stop right here, right? You don't actually need to start looking at what bombs are being used, because every single airplane dropping them is of US origin. Of course, the US also provides the bombs themselves, a variety of air-to-ground munition, as well as ground munition, so things that tanks or artillery pieces fire. Firearms, of course, as well. Critical technology for systems like the tanks. So the Merkava, which Hazem mentioned and showed a picture of, Israel actually produces, but it produces based on or built around a US engine and based on a design of US tracks. So again, technology integrated there, and of course a lot of ISR, that's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, so intelligence technology as well. So the US is deeply integrated and critical to Israel's military capabilities. How deeply? So 83% of Israel's arms since 1950 of its imports are from the US. I think that's important to note. I do want to note that the vast majority of that 83% actually is since 1973, so 1973 and onwards. Prior to then, the UK and France were the main providers, but the US is now by far the leading provider of arms to Israel. So what we face in the US, what we faced even before October 7th, is a set of broken processes and policies. One of those, I say here, moribund policy. As Hazem has pointed out, the Oslo process is dead. It is moribund. And if it wasn't dead by 2000, it certainly was very soon after that. And yet, the US approach remains a commitment to the Oslo process, even as it allows, for example, Israeli settlements to expand in the West Bank. One aspect, a key aspect of the US approach since Oslo has been, quote unquote, security for peace. this notion that, if we provide Israel with these military capabilities, if we allow Israel to be secure, it will then feel safe enough to make the concessions needed to achieve peace. That's the theory. In practice, what has happened, I would argue, is that Israel has become so secure as a result of the military technology the US has provided, that there is no incentive for it to come to peace. It feels that it can expand settlements, it can throw up walls around Gaza and the West Bank, and essentially proceed as if, the Palestinians did not exist. And so I think that our policies at a starting point have greatly contributed to the situation we see now. There has been, or there was, prior to October 6th, certainly some discussion within the US government about issues like Israeli settlements, about certain arms transfers, but by and large, these went nowhere. And no limitations were significantly or seriously placed in any context. And the Leahy law is an example of this, right? So you'll remember this is the law that says we cannot provide assistance to the units of a foreign security force that are credibly alleged to be committing gross violations of human rights. For almost every country in the world, the way that process works is before the US provides assistance to a unit of a foreign security force, it vets that unit. It researches whether there are any allegations of human rights violations against that unit, and if there are, it does not provide the assistance. For Israel, the process is reversed. The US provides the assistance, and then through a unique forum called the Israel Leahy Vetting Forum, it theoretically listens out for any allegations that might come along. And the problem is that, first of all, that forum, again, is a unique process. That forum, as part of its process, requires the US to reach out to Israel if it thinks that there's a credible allegation and get Israel's side of the story and ask if they're doing anything. That's unique to Israel. It then requires the Secretary of State, or at least at the very least, the Deputy Secretary of State, to agree that there has been a credible violation of human rights. Again, a unique step for Israel. And, surprise, surprise, the Israel Leahy Vetting Forum has never led to the suspension of assistance to any Israeli unit on the basis of a violation of human rights. So even prior to October 7th, even from October 6th and before, there was this set of broken processes and policies. And of course, what we've seen since October 7th is a complete breakdown of the process in order to continue to flow weapons to Israel, even as the catastrophe in Gaza has unfolded. That includes a top-down process, right? So we remember that the arms transfer process is supposed to be bottom-up. People review it, it moves up the chain, and finally there's an approval. Since October 7th, essentially approval has been directed by the Secretary of State, by the White House. So there has not been any sort of policy review or discussion that can be effectively managed. The conventional arms transfer policy that we talked about, of course, seemingly out of the window. Leahy and these other human rights laws, such as the prohibition on assistance to countries that are restricting humanitarian assistance, not enforced, not applied. The administration, in fact, has been looking for any available authorities in order to expedite arms transfers to Israel, and has even, through the recent Supplemental Appropriations Act, found and created new authorities to make things move faster with less oversight. It has also used extraordinary authorities within the law to conduct emergency arms sales, as well as working around the law, frankly, to bypass congressional oversight. And of course, that broken and moribund policy remains in place. So what we have seen is just a complete breakdown and a politicization of what is supposed to be a policy process. What has that led to? So as we know, at least 41,000 killed in Gaza, mostly by US weapons. Of course, there are estimates that run much higher than that, particularly as you include indirect deaths from the war. So, people who, for example, need medication, people with diabetes, people with cancer, children who are, going through famine and malnourishment. So probably much, much higher death toll than this 41,000 captures. But of those 40,000, killed directly, which again also doesn't include, of course, those whose bodies remain under the rubble, most of those have been killed by US weapons. We've seen, of course, the devastation of housing, schools, of infrastructure to include electricity, water, hospitals, etc. We've seen an expansion of settler-led violence in the West Bank, often with the support, direct support of the Israeli Defense Forces and security forces. We've seen this increasing risk of regional escalation, and the longer Israel operations in Gaza go on, the greater the risk is of a broader regional conflict. I think, as we see, Lebanon right now is on a knife's edge. And we've seen a US response that is to continue to flow weapons and to neglect the leverage that it has because it is providing and enabling Israel to conduct these operations. So what is the impact? Of course, it is, first and foremost, a disaster for the Palestinian people. It is also, I would argue, a set of policies and approaches that has not made Israel itself any safer. In fact, has left it more isolated than ever and facing generations of future conflict. And it is a disaster for US national security and national interests, right? We have seen US credibility abolished across the world stage, particularly in the global south. We have seen US relationships in the region torn apart, as well as the destabilization of the entire region. And we've also now seen this feed into an undermining of US civil rights at home, where we see, particularly on university campuses, but not only, acts of repression of a type that we have not seen, certainly since the 1960s and the civil rights movement. So at all levels, I think this has been a disastrous approach for everyone involved, particularly for the Palestinians, but for everyone involved. So where do we go from here? There's been for many months these talks about a ceasefire and ceasefire talks. Will there be a ceasefire? There are two things to keep in mind here. I think the first is that, I think, we can all agree at this point that Benjamin Netanyahu has been stringing everyone along, including to some extent even his own, or some in his own cabinet, and that the odds of an actual effective ceasefire agreement are close to none, at least I would say through the next 2 months. But let's also not get confused and think that a ceasefire means that this is all over and we can all go home. I don't know how different the day after a ceasefire looks to the day before a ceasefire in terms of the situation in Gaza, whether we're talking about the urgent humanitarian needs or Israel's willingness to continue to strike targets where it feels it wants to do so. So I think, we are all a bit fixated on a ceasefire. We do need urgently a permanent and immediate ceasefire, but that is only one piece of what we need. Of course, there's also this continuing risk of regional escalation, which, of course, is most prominent now, certainly in the Lebanon context. But what happens in the West Bank matters both to the Palestinian people and to the region. And I think it is increasingly clear that with Gaza, quote unquote, done, Israel is turning its attention now to the West Bank, and that should be of great concern. There's obviously the question of how the US elections play into this and whether a different administration, whether it be a Harris administration or a Trump administration, would approach things differently. I don't know that either would particularly, but we can talk about how that might play out. This question of reconstruction for Gaza, right? How do you reconstruct somewhere that has been so devastated, right? I mean, UN estimates are that it will take 10 years to clear the rubble alone, setting aside the billions upon billions of dollars it will cost to rebuild hospitals, schools, homes, to restart an economy. How do you restart an economy when Israel is likely to retain its restrictions on the supply of building materials into Gaza, and so on and so forth? So when and how does that happen? And will US policy ever change in this regard? My actually sense, and maybe we'll end on this positive note, is that it will. US policy will change. But when? How long is that going to take? I think, US public perceptions and public opinion has shifted remarkably in the last year, and there is only so long that, politicians can pursue a course that is so radically different than that of their own populations. I also think that there is, at a geostrategic level, a geopolitical level, a cost to the US of continuing with its current policy. That will only continue to rise in terms of, again, our relationships around the world. And I think between those two factors, things will turn, but they will turn. They have already been too late for Gaza. And I think the question before us is whether working together, all of us around the world, whether politicians, humanitarian workers, ELT professionals, can raise our voices in order to shift things and to change, chart a course for change and to push changes that can come, if not in time for Gaza, at least in time for the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Thank you.
Josh, thank you very much for that. Some good things and some perhaps somewhat disappointing things. There are quite a few questions. I'm going to be reading them out first. Quite a few thank yous both on the Facebook sharing and on here. I'm going to start with a question that was addressed to actually to both of you. It's a question from a person on Facebook. It was originally addressed to Hazem, but I think both of you could answer it. He says, thank you for your incredibly informative presentation, Hazem. My heart goes out to you and your people. Would you agree that it's essential that Palestinian freedom depends on the wider international community taking a side range of decisive steps? Which actions will have the greatest impact, and which actions are the most urgent in your opinion? And then a thank you from David. And I think it's a question that I think I can ask to both of you. So whoever wants to answer first, over to you.
Okay. Thank you. This question is from, I think, Sarah. Yes, from Sarah. Yes, I think Palestine will not be liberated as long as the U.S. support to Israel continues, and the U.S. and the Western support in general. But the most important support is the U.S. one, because it's more powerful and very it has a very high impact on Israel. The Israeli occupation cannot continue without the U.S. absolute support to it, militarily, politically, economically, in all aspects of Israel as a state. So I think even if the Palestinian resistance continue and get more powerful and could be able to even destroy Israel, physical Israel, it will not be the solution, because the U.S. support continues to Israel. So we need to focus on the international solidarity, especially in the Western countries, and more particularly in the U.S. Because I think they always talk about Hamas as an idea and notion, but for me, Israel is an idea. Israel is an idea for many people in the U.S. They like Israel, and they support Israel for different reasons, for religion, for religious reasons, and for political reasons, and for other reasons. Regardless of the reasons they like, that make them love Israel, but Israel for them is an idea, and according to their belief, they have to maintain it. So we need to continue our struggle and to fight on the international level to convince them it is an apartheid entity, occupying entity, and there will be an ethical burden they need to pay as long as they continue their support to Israel. So it is very important. It is actually, the resistance doesn't start from Palestine. Actually, it starts from the international level, and solidarity through spreading awareness among the people about Israel behavior, and about Israel as discriminate, and you can say that as an entity occupying an oppressive entity, not as a nice country, a sophisticated democratic country, as they try to promote it in the West. We have to do that. We have to reveal its real ugly face, among its supporters in the international level, especially, as I mentioned, in the US. And I think Josh also has something to say about this one, and he has more knowledge about the impact of the US support on the continuation of the colonial Israeli project in Palestine.
Yeah, no, thanks, Hazem. I agree with everything you said. I think that, you're absolutely right that this isn't going to be resolved without international involvement and international pressure. I do think that there is an important and very underutilized role for the West and particularly for Europe in all of this in a couple of ways. First of all, directly, and we have seen some countries in Europe beginning to step ahead of where the US is, for example, on arms transfers, where we have seen Italy, which was prior last year, the number 3 supplier of arms to Israel, cutting off supplies entirely. We have seen the UK for the first time suspend certain arms transfers to Israel in just the last couple of weeks. And this, first of all, is important in its own right. It also adds pressure on the US to follow. And I think that's important. So I think that raising voices within Europe and across Europe in particular, and across the global South, right, and increasing these geopolitical costs to the US is an important step, and in their own right as well, right, because we're at a point where I think it is immensely clear, if it hasn't already been for years, that as much as it calls itself an honest broker in the Israeli-Palestinian context, the US is not and cannot be an honest broker. And so there is a need for someone else. And, I think that there is a problem here that no one else seems to be stepping in to fill that role. But I think that there is an urgent need there. And I would hope that, others in the international community will find common cause to do so.
Josh, the next two, I'm going to read 2 questions to you. I think they are at least somewhat related. The first question is from Tamara. She says, I'm interested to know if Josh has a short piece of advice for activists responding to Zionists who oppose us. She does say, I think the current question might somewhat encompass this. And then the second question that I think is at least somewhat related, how much of the US support to Israel now is ideological versus influenced by lobby groups, and how can we combat lobbyists?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Gerhard. I think on that first question of advice for activists, there are 2 things that come to mind. The first, very much reflects, not only what Hazem was saying, but also the fact that Hazem is saying it, which is, continue to humanize the Palestinians. I think we have a massive problem here in which people, have a sense of Israelis and, but that doesn't convey to Palestinians. And we see that at all levels of US government and society, that stereotypes continue to abound. And so I think continuing to tell Palestinian stories, continuing to platform Palestinian voices. Someone recently made the interesting point to me that if you think about past US anti-war protests, Vietnam, Iraq, this is really the first anti-war protest in which the voices of the victims of that war are leading it. The Vietnam War protests were not led by Vietnamese Americans. The Iraq War protests were not led by Iraqi Americans, but there are many Palestinian Americans who are leading here, and I think it's important to continue to put them in front. The second thing I would say on that question is one of the things I find is quite useful is simply turning questions around, because people, make so many inbuilt assumptions in what they say. So things like, doesn't Israel have a right to defend itself? Don't the Palestinians have a right to defend themselves? Things like that. I find that there are just so many questions, so many assumptions. And when you just turn the question around and replace Israeli with Palestinian, very often it creates that sort of cognitive dissonance in people where they stop and think, oh yeah, wait a second. So obviously that's not going to be the case against people who are very ideologically committed, but I think for a large part of the audience, that is a useful tactic. The second question was, routes of support and lobbying. Yes, so, I think we have seen a significant shift in American public perceptions, but not in, congressional or political perceptions or actions. I think there has been a shift, right? We now have about 100 members of Congress who have called for a permanent immediate ceasefire, or who have sent letters to the president asking him to impose conditionality on arms transfers, or who have, taken other steps or, trying to increase humanitarian assistance. That's, still less than 20% of Congress. But it's a heck of a lot more than there was a year ago. But for the rest, yes, I do think that the role of money in American politics and the effective way by which it is used and leveraged through organizations that I wouldn't even say are pro-Israel, but I would say are pro the very most right-wing aspects of Israel, whether we are talking about most famously AIPAC, but also Christians United for Israel, CUFI, Democratic Majority for Israel, DMFI, or others, absolutely has an impact on politicians. And I have heard directly from elected officials in the US Congress that, they think that what Israel is doing with our weapons is war crimes, but I will never say so publicly because I will lose my seat. Now, their seat may not have anyone who particularly cares about this issue in its constituency, but they know that there is a risk that they will then be primaried by someone who is bringing a lot of money to the table to do so. So that absolutely is an issue. And I think that there are a few things we need to do here. Certainly the most obvious, but probably the hardest, is reform of campaign finances in the law in the US. In the meantime, I think that we need to get better at playing the same game. We need to take a similar approach and find ways to do that. And that is something that I and others are working on doing in the months and years to come.
I'm going to direct the next one also to Josh, mostly because it's somewhat related. The question is, Josh, disappointing dismissal at the Ninth Circuit Court regarding challenging the US government for complicity in genocide. What does this result mean for future legal challenges? For example, are activists exploring bringing the court executive to non-compliance with the Lee law, and when it comes to Israel? From Nasser.
Yeah, sure. So Nasser is talking about a case brought by the Center for Constitutional Rights against this Biden administration under the Genocide Convention, to which the US is a party, seeking, amongst other things, an injunction on the transfer of arms to Israel. The Ninth Circuit, well, so first of all, this federal court to which the case was first brought dismissed the case on the grounds that this is ultimately a policy question, not a judicial question. It's important to note that in doing so, a US federal judge wrote that what is happening in Gaza is plausibly a case of genocide. So that is a judge writing in a decision. I think that's significant, but doesn't change anything. But that case, I do want to note, is currently being appealed for a second time to the Ninth Circuit on bank. I think that appeal hearing is scheduled for later this month. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work. And I think that we do have a significant problem within the US on the right of citizens to bring cases against government or against government policies, or even where government is failing to apply the law. It is a very high bar to overcome. So I think we do need to think about other mechanisms. Obviously the ICC, there are pending warrants and indictments. We'll see if those get issued. But third-party courts as well, right? Third country courts. So many of the crimes we're talking about here that Israel is committing, or that America is facilitating, are crimes of international jurisdiction, of universal jurisdiction. And they can be brought to court in other countries, in South Africa, in Spain, in Ireland, in many, many countries, all countries that are party to the Geneva Conventions, for example. And I think that will happen. It will take time. I don't know that there will be any convictions, but I do suspect that once he leaves office, for example, it will be very hard for Mr. Blinken to go on holiday to Europe. And that is a start.
Sorry for the smile. A question to both of you that isn't really a question, that we had it in the first panel as well. People are asking if they can, if you can share the slides with them. If you can, would you mind emailing them to me, and then we can put them on social media and people can access them.
Okay.
Hazem, a question for you. If you want to look at it, it's Ancient Doherty's question. The question is just, she says, I'm convinced that international pressure from the world's citizens will eventually end Israeli occupation. Are there any specific actions you can recommend to continue this pressure apart from BDS? And then also, how can people keep in contact with you was the second part of her question.
Yes, sure. Continuation pressure on the occupying system and the colonial system is very important to get rid of the Israeli occupation. I mean here not only Israel itself and Israel, I mean Israel and its supporters, because as you know, Israel is a colonial project supported by the Western countries who are complicit to the crime that Israel is committing now. So the first thing we need to uh, illegitimate the Israel uh, existence in its form, in its current form. We have to delegitimate Israel as occupying power. Israel established itself as a Jewish state exclusively for Jewish people, and it's actually resist notion and resist foundation, disregarding and ignoring the Arab who were the majority at the time, and establishing a state for specific religion followers. So we need to expose that idea. It doesn't mean we need to be careful when we discuss this point. It doesn't mean we want to uh, displace Jews from Palestine. They can stay here, but not as with superiority or with the primacy. They have advantages over the other people. We should discuss the idea of equality, and we don't be trapped under the mythos or the notion of democratic state in the Middle East, as they try to market Israel to us, or as they market Israel in the West. We need to respond on all the claims that Israel and its supporters use to get support from the younger generation, from school, high school, and college and universities in the West. So it is very important to organize our first, not ourselves and our organizations. We need to organize our thought, how to respond to the Israeli claims to delegitimize its existence as a resist entity. We don't want to delegitimize the Jewish existence in Palestine. We need to differentiate between these terms. So we need to focus on knowledge. And I understand that Israel doesn't only rely on knowledge, or they don't use the power of knowledge to convince the others. They use their surplus of power and support from the West to maintain the status quo. It is very important to understand this one, to understand this point. Israel doesn't only focus on knowledge, it focuses on the power and support it has. The power it has, it comes from the politician in the US and the congressmen and the other powerful people. So we need to confine them, and to show the basic, or the people who support them, they are supporting the wrong side, which is not as they imagine. It is not a nice country. It is not a peaceful country, and the savage Arabs want to throw it in the sea. It is not like this. Actually, Israel is the only state that was built based on the religious foundation. The other countries don't. There is no country in the world was established on religious foundation as Israel. So we need to we need to respond on many claims by Israel's to attract or to stop the youth and the other people from supporting the politician who support Israel. So we need to start from that point, from the basic, who support the politician that support the colonial project in Palestine. And for contacting me, I think it's not difficult. If you just type my name on Google, you will find some interviews for me on different media platforms. And I don't know, is it possible to say my email here or just type?
They won't be able to see it. What I can do, I forget now, is ask the question, is if you send a message to the ELT Professionals for Palestine group, if you want to contact Josh, then I can check with him that it's okay, and I can just pass his details on to you.
Okay.
Oh, not Josh, sorry, Hazem, sorry. Wrong person's name. Josh, we're basically at the end, but there are two questions that I'm going to just ask you as one question before we finish up. There's a comment, and there was going to be a question about it, but I don't think we're going to have time. The person basically said a man of principle resigning because of your beliefs is activism. I think all of us here would agree with that. The questions are related to Harris and to UNRWA. The first question being, do you think that UNRWA funding will be renewed, considering that things like the pier and the airdrops have failed? And the second question is, considering that I don't have time to read out the whole question. Do you think a Harris administration would be any different, considering they haven't mentioned international law, ICC, ICJ rulings, or anything like that? What's your general opinion about, well, first UNRWA and to a potential Harris presidency?
Yeah, just very quickly. So on UNRWA, for the US to restore funding, it would require an act of Congress. Congress passed a law that we cannot provide that funding. So Congress has to pass a law saying that we can. If that is to happen anytime soon, it will be in the context of the annual government funding bill for 2025, which is unlikely to pass before December at the earliest, and depending on what happens in the elections, possibly much later. And of course, this will also depend on the outcome of the elections in Congress and whether there are, for example, Democratic majorities in both the House and the Senate that would be willing to advance such language. I don't think that there will be. So I would certainly, not expect the US, unfortunately, to turn on the funding for UNRWA. At least my guess would be for another year, if not longer. But we will see. It is at least it is possible, but I think it's a long shot. On Harris, yeah, I mean, look, all we can go by, right, is what she has said. So I do think that the people around her are certainly better than the people who are around Biden, right? And I do think that Harris is not an ideologue on this in the way that Biden is. But she has not given any clear indication that she would do anything significantly different. And I also think that even if she wanted to, there are underlying political dynamics, as we saw with President Obama, that make this very hard. So the bottom line is, again, if we're talking about the US changing, I do still think it will happen. I do not think it will happen significantly in the context of one election cycle or two election cycles. I think we're talking about a decade or longer.
We do have another panel starting in 25 minutes. So thank you very much to both of you for being here. If you are attending this one and you would like to attend the one starting in 26 minutes and you haven't registered, there is still some time. Just again, Josh, Hazem, thank you very much to both of you. Very informative.